What if I told you an ancient cult murdered over 1 million people, ruled entire cities, terrified emperors, and history barely punished them? This isn't a myth. This is not some exaggerated campfire story. This is the real, documented history of the Thuggee cult of ancient India, and the story will change how you see history forever. For centuries, across the vast and dusty roads of India, travelers simply vanished. One day they were there, sharing a meal with fellow pilgrims or merchants, and the next, they were gone. No witnesses, no screams, no bodies left behind, only whispers and rumors of shadowy figures, men who seemed to worship death itself. They were called the Thuggee. The name comes from the Sanskrit word stagati, which means to conceal or deceive. And for over 600 years, they perfected the art of murder, not as a crime, but as a sacred religious duty. So who exactly were the Thuggee? This wasn't some small, localized group. The cult operated across the entire Indian subcontinent, from the bustling regions of Bengal and Delhi, through Awadh and Hyderabad, and deep into the heart of central India. They were masters of disguise, blending seamlessly into the fabric of society. They posed as merchants carrying goods, as devout pilgrims on their way to a holy site, as soldiers looking for their next post, or simply as friendly fellow travelers seeking safety in numbers. They would join a caravan, sometimes traveling with their intended victims for days, even weeks. They would share stories, food, and laughter, slowly and meticulously gaining their complete trust. And then, when the moment was right, they would kill. Silently. Their signature weapon wasn't a sword or a dagger. It was a rummel, a simple piece of yellow or white cloth, a ceremonial scarf used to strangle their victims from behind. The method was brutally efficient. No blood was spilled, no noise was made to alert others, and crucially, no evidence was left behind. They were ghosts, leaving only a void where a person used to be. To understand how they could commit such acts with such conviction, you have to understand their faith. The Thuggee were devout followers of Kali, the powerful Hindu goddess of destruction, death, and time. In their twisted theology, they believed they were her chosen instruments on earth. They believed that every murder they committed was preordained by Kali herself, that each victim was a sacrifice she demanded to maintain the cosmic balance of the universe. To them, killing wasn't a sin, it was a holy act. This belief system was deeply ingrained, supported by a complex web of rituals. Before an attack, they would look for specific omens: the call of a certain bird, the crossing of a particular animal as a sign of Kali's approval. Before the final act of strangling, they would whisper prayers to their goddess. And after the murder, the bodies weren't just dumped, they were disposed of in a ceremonial burial, interred in a secret grave known as a bell, consecrated with a ritual involving sugar. For the Thuggee, murder was sacred. The process of a Thuggee attack was chillingly methodical, a well-rehearsed play performed over and over again. First came the infiltration. A group of thugs, known as a gang, would identify a group of travelers. The most charming and trustworthy among them, called the Sathas or inveiglers, would approach the targets and suggest they travel together for safety. Once trust was fully established, often after days on the road, the gang would wait for the perfect moment, usually at night in a secluded spot far from any village or patrol. The leader of the gang would give a predetermined signal, a common phrase like "bring the tobacco" or a specific gesture. Instantly, the killers, known as the Bertos, would strike. Positioned behind their victims, they would throw the rummel around the neck, with one thug pressing on the victim's back to ensure a quick, silent death. The entire group, sometimes dozens of people, could be wiped out in moments without a single cry for help. The bodies were then stripped of all valuables, their joints broken to make them fit into smaller graves, and buried so expertly that the ground appeared undisturbed. The sheer scale of their operation is difficult to comprehend. Based on the extensive records kept during the British colonial era, it's estimated that the Thuggee murdered over 1 million people. Some modern historians argue the number could be as high as 2 million, making them by far the most prolific and deadliest criminal organization in human history. The personal tallies are even more staggering. It was not uncommon for individual thugs, when finally captured, to confess to killing hundreds of people personally. One of the most infamous Thuggee leaders, a man named Bahram, is said to have personally murdered over 900 people with his rummel. To put that into perspective, that makes him, by a huge margin, one of the deadliest serial killers ever recorded. So how did they get away with it for so long? For 600 years. There are several key reasons. For most of this period, there was no forensic science, no DNA testing, no fingerprinting. Without a body, there was no crime. India was also a patchwork of different kingdoms and territories, with no centralized law enforcement. A crime committed in one jurisdiction was of no concern to the rulers of the next. The thugs exploited this, moving freely across borders. Furthermore, their methods were designed for stealth. The bodies were hidden so well they were almost never found. Local rulers and officials were often either terrified of the Thuggee in their pocket, or simply chose to ignore the problem as long as it involved travelers and not their own subjects. But perhaps the most crucial element to their longevity was that the cult was a hereditary profession. Knowledge, techniques, and religious beliefs were passed down from father to son. Children were initiated into the cult at a young age, starting as lookouts, then helping with burials, before eventually being trained to become killers themselves. It was a closed, self-sustaining society built on murder. Everything changed in the 1830s with the arrival of one determined British officer, Major William Henry Sleeman. He was horrified by the stories of the Thuggee and made it his life's mission to eradicate them. He launched the Thuggee and Dacoity Suppression Department, a campaign that was as systematic and relentless as the cult itself. Sleeman's genius was in understanding he couldn't fight them with force alone. He needed information. He developed a massive intelligence network, using informants and, most effectively, captured thugs who were offered their lives in exchange for confessions. These men, known as approvers, provided everything: names, locations, rituals, and the locations of the secret burial sites, the bells. Sleeman's teams meticulously mapped the cult's operations across the country. Armed with this knowledge, the British began dismantling the cult piece by piece. Over the next few decades, thousands of thugs were captured. Many were executed by hanging, others were imprisoned for life or exiled. By 1870, after a brutal and sustained campaign, the Thuggee cult was officially declared eradicated. Though the cult itself is gone, its dark legacy endures in a very common, everyday way. The English word thug, meaning a violent criminal or ruffian, comes directly from the name Thuggee. A word born from centuries of organized, ritualized terror is still used today, often without any knowledge of its horrifying origins. This wasn't a legend. This wasn't an exaggeration. This was a real, organized murder cult that flourished for centuries, hiding in plain sight. An uncomfortable truth that reminds us how much of our history remains buried, just waiting to be uncovered. If you want to explore more dark history, forbidden knowledge, and the hidden truths that shape our world, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.